corrupt systems that had been operating in the shadows for years. At the end of it all, Marcus stood beside his brother Julian, looking at the chaos that had once been the justice system. He knew they had only scratched the surface. The system was broken, but they had the power to fix it. As the last of the corrupt officials were escorted into federal custody, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had won. But the real victory would come when they rebuilt the system, not just for him, not just for Julian, but for everyone who had suffered under the weight of corruption. Marcus nodded, his mind racing through everything they had uncovered. The planted drugs in his car were just the beginning. Now, the full extent of the corruption was starting to surface. Money trails leading to judges, prosecutors, and even politicians who were complicit in the scheme. "Do you think they know what's coming?" Marcus asked, his voice low but steady. The phone in the corner of the room buzzed, and Julian picked it up without a word. He listened for a few moments, his eyes scanning the room. His expression shifted, his jaw tightening as he hung up the phone. "That was Agent Mitchell. The full raid on regional resource management is underway," Julian said, his tone grim. "They're about to hit the headquarters of the private prison company behind this whole operation. We're going to find the big players now, the ones who've been profiting from all of this." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes alight with determination. "Let's do it. Let's make sure they understand this isn't just about me. This is about every person they've wronged, every life they've destroyed for profit." "Do they realize how big this is going to get?" Julian leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowed in thought. "They have no idea. They think they're in control, but they're just the foot soldiers in a much larger scheme. This goes far beyond Ashford. It's about private prisons, political corruption, and a system that has been profiting off the backs of the innocent for too long." As the sun began to set, the Ashford police station became the center of a massive federal investigation. Officers who had once walked with their heads high now found themselves under the watchful eyes of federal agents, their every move recorded. McCallum, the DA, was hauled into federal custody for his role in the operation. His smug demeanor faded as the reality of his situation set in. Marcus, meanwhile, had become a symbol of justice, a man wrongfully arrested, whose case had sparked a nationwide investigation into corruption. What had started with a simple traffic stop was now a massive federal case that was about to take down an entire network of corrupt officials, judges, and law enforcement officers. But for Marcus, this was just the beginning. He knew there was still much work to be done. There were more corrupt officers to expose, more powerful figures to bring down. And with Julian by his side, they were ready for whatever came next. The night stretched on, and the Ashford police station buzzed with frenetic energy. Federal agents, their badges gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, moved with precision through the station, cataloging evidence, interviewing officers, and dismantling the corruption piece by piece. In the small interrogation room, Marcus sat across from Julian, both men silent for a moment as they absorbed what was happening around them. The storm had hit, and the small-town justice system, once so carefully orchestrated, was collapsing under its own weight. Marcus could almost hear Julian's wheels turning, the strategy already forming in his mind. "I'll get the ball rolling right away," Julian said. "Hold tight. I'll be there soon." Back at the station, Marcus was left alone in his cell. He spent the next few hours thinking about everything he had learned so far. The planted evidence, the corrupt officers, the involvement of the DA. It was all part of a bigger picture. This wasn't just about him. This was about a system that had been abusing its power for years, all for profit. But Marcus wasn't just going to sit here and let it unfold. He had an idea. He knew he needed to stay calm, to keep his wits about him. The officers thought they had the upper hand, but they had no idea what they were dealing with. The sound of footsteps outside his cell snapped him out of his thoughts. He looked up to see Officer Dean and Officer Holt standing at the cell door. Behind them was McCallum, the district attorney, who stepped forward with a smug grin. "You know, you should have taken the deal when you had the chance," McCallum said, his voice laced with mock sympathy. "But you'll soon realize it's too late for that. We've got you, Marcus. You're going to pay for this. Marcus stayed silent, his gaze unwavering. He had nothing to fear from these people. They were just small fish in a much bigger pond. Get him out of here, McCallum ordered. They took him back into the booking area, where the final steps of his processing were carried out. It was a slow, meticulous process, designed to wear him down, to break his resolve. But Marcus didn't let them see the storm raging inside him. When Marcus was finally alone in his holding cell once again, he knew the time had come. The system they had built, the one that had framed him, that had wrongfully convicted so many before him, was about to come crashing down. His brother was already on his way, and when Julian arrived, everything would change. A few hours later, Marcus's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Julian. I'm here. I've already mobilized the task force. They're going to feel the full weight of what they've done. Marcus smiled. He had been right. They had no idea what they were about to face. By the time Julian arrived at the station, the corruption that had been festering in Ashford for decades was starting to unravel. Julian, with his experience and connections, had already begun a full investigation into the local justice system. He had federal agents on the ground, reviewing evidence, interviewing officers, and connecting the dots. Julian, he said, his voice steady. I need your help. On the other end, his brother's voice was calm, but Marcus could hear the steel behind it. Talk to me, Marcus. What happened? I was pulled over in Ashford, and they planted drugs in my car. They're charging me with possession. I've been framed. Marcus explained. There was a long pause before Julian spoke again, his voice controlled. Are you hurt? No, Marcus replied, shaking his head, even though his brother couldn't see it. But this goes deeper than just me. These people are running an operation here, and they've been doing it for years. I need you to investigate Ashford's entire justice system. Every arrest, every case, every piece of evidence. They're not just targeting me. This is systemic. In a small town where travelers disappear and judges convict without question, a perfect system of injustice flourished. For over 20 years, this system ran undisturbed, ruthlessly manipulating lives for profit, with officers planting evidence as routinely as writing traffic tickets. But like all machines, this one had a flaw. It couldn't tell the difference between prey and predator. It was a warm afternoon when Marcus Rhodes, an influential business consultant, found himself pulled over on a quiet road in the town of Ashford. At first glance, the officers assumed they had their next victim, a successful man, someone they could frame for their own gain. But what they didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just another traveler passing through. He had something none of their other targets had. A brother who could destroy their corrupt empire from the top down. Marcus kept his cool as the officers approached his car. The tall one, Officer Dean, spoke first. License and registration, sir. Marcus, his demeanor calm, handed over his credentials. Is there a reason I've been pulled over, officer? Dean glanced at his partner, Officer Holt, before speaking. Your brake lights are out. Marcus's brow furrowed slightly. That's impossible. I had the car serviced just this morning. Are you sure? The officers exchanged a glance before asking him to step out of the car. Tension hung thick in the air, and as Marcus stepped out, he noticed something off. In the way they handled the situation. Something wasn't right. Marcus knew the drill. He had built his career by staying composed under pressure. But this was different. As Holt began patting him down, Marcus could feel the adrenaline creeping into his veins. I demand to see your body cam footage, he said, voice unwavering. You didn't have probable cause to search my vehicle. The officers just laughed. That's what they all say, Dean sneered. Guess what? Your trunk's got a little surprise in it. At that moment, Marcus's mind raced. He knew exactly what was going on. He had seen it before, read about it in countless reports of unjust arrests in small towns like Ashford. The police officers had planted drugs in his car. They were framing him.
Morning of the final takedown, Marcus stood with Julian, watching as the FBI and federal agents stormed the offices of the remaining corrupt officials, including Senator Phillips. News outlets flooded the scene, cameras flashing as the senator was led away in handcuffs. As Marcus watched it all unfold, he felt a sense of justice, not just for himself, but for all the lives that had been destroyed by the corrupt system. The battle had been long, and the road to reform was still ahead. But this was a victory not just for him, but for every person who had suffered at the hands of a broken system. The machine of corruption had fallen, but the fight for true justice was only just beginning. And Marcus was ready for it. With his brother by his side, he knew they would continue to fight until every last piece of the corrupt system was dismantled, until the truth was fully exposed, and until justice was finally served.